An introduction to Crusoe Economics. Crusoe Economics is a lens through which we can view economic ideas in a simplified form. Imagine a man stranded on a desert island. Here we have an individual isolated from society. What will he do first? He'll have any number of priorities. First, perhaps to find some drinking water, then to build a shelter, harvest coconuts, collect driftwood, go fishing, try to build a boat, take a rest, etc. What he will do first will depend on his value scale. He will try to satisfy his most urgent priority first. Then once that is met, he will move on to his second and third priority, and so on. His priorities will also be informed by his means, that is, what he is capable of doing. He might desire to return to society, but he will not take action to obtain that result if he does not conceive of his ends being able to achieve it. Contained within this whole schedule of activities is the concept of human action. That man will first conceive of the desired ends he wishes to bring about, say a delicious fish dinner, and then go about implementing a plan to obtain that ends. For example, he will wade out into the waters and try to catch a fish with his hands, or he might fashion a spear and try to catch the fish that way. So his ends are his goals, the state he wishes to bring about. His means is any process or effort by that man to attempt to achieve his ends. There would be production on this island. Essentially, any activity by man taken to increase his wealth would be production. That could be gathering more coconuts, planting a vegetable garden, fishing, building a shelter, etc. Capital would also exist in this economy. Capital is man-made factors of production. So if our hero builds a fishing pole, that fishing pole is capital. It makes his efforts more productive. The saving/consumption dichotomy would also be present in this nascent economy. He could save his income, say coconuts he gathered, or he could consume them right away. Likewise, he could save his gathered driftwood, or he could use it in a fire. Another economic concept we can observe in this one-man economy is time preference. Time preference is the degree to which an individual wants stuff now versus in the future. So a high time preference individual cares more about today and less about tomorrow, whereas a low time preference individual cares more about the future and less about the present. A high time preference individual might place a lot of value on leisure activities, like relaxing in a hammock, whereas a low time preference individual might spend more time gathering resources and or creating capital to make his future labor more productive. Now things get interesting with the second person in the mix, Friday. We can introduce the concept of private property. Before, with just one person, there was no need for private property. The whole of the island was unowned and up for grabs. But now, if Crusoe spends all day gathering coconuts, then they become his property. This is important because coconuts are scarce and not always good. Both Crusoe and Friday would probably like to drink the coconut water and eat the coconut meat. So their existence in human biology creates an inherent conflict. Property rights are a way of avoiding conflict. This also encourages productive behavior. If Friday can just consume the coconuts Crusoe gathers, then Crusoe would be less incentivized to gather the coconuts in the first place. Or he might just go and gather one and consume it so as to avoid Friday's predation of his work. On the other hand, they can engage in trade. If Crusoe spends all day gathering coconuts and Friday spends all day fishing, they might wish to trade some amount of fish for some amount of coconuts, especially if Friday has more fish than he can eat before they will spoil and or vice versa. If there is going to be an exchange, you will need an exchange ratio. Since there is no money, and indeed no need for money, everything will be priced in terms of goods you can exchange for. 3 coconuts for 1 fish, 15 coconuts for 1 fishing spear, and prices would fluctuate based upon supply and demand. They might also engage in loans. Say Friday wants to get rid of his fish before they spoil, but he doesn't want to eat anymore. Crusoe wants to eat the fish, but he doesn't have anything he wants to trade right now. Crusoe might borrow the fish from Friday, and agree to pay him back from future efforts. With loans, we also enter into the concept of interest. Now, this previous example might not even have interest. In fact, Friday may put on a sale on the fish. If normally one fish trades for 3 coconuts, then he might sell the fish to Crusoe for a 2 coconut to 1 deal, simply because they will go bad otherwise. This can be true even in the case of a loan. Normally, we would expect to see interest charged on a loan to account for time preference. For example, if Friday wants to borrow 2 coconuts from Crusoe, he might offer to repay with 1 fish above the market rate, since the coconuts are relatively non-perishable and to account for time preference. There is virtually no chance that either party would default on a loan because of the discipline of repeat dealing. To default would mean to lose the ability to trade entirely. Now, probably with just 2 people, you couldn't have a true division of labor economy. You could have specialization in exchange because certain activities like fishing might have a high skill cap. So it makes sense for one person to focus on fishing so they keep getting better and more efficient, while the other does various tasks like gathering coconuts, gathering driftwood, or constructing shelter. Now let's fast forward a bit and imagine a 10-person economy. So everyone is going to go about their daily life being productive. Of course, someone could stay idle, but then presumably the people who spent all day working would not want to share the efforts of their production with them. After all, these people are working basically at the level of subsistence agriculture, where it's hard enough to feed yourself, let alone a freeloader. At this point, you would probably have high degrees of specialization. You might have multiple fishermen, since fish would probably be an important resource, assuming there's no fauna on the island, offering the highest calorie rewarded to calorie expended of any potential food source. Then you could have someone who makes rope, someone who gathers wood, someone who cooks and cleans, someone who makes clothes, somebody who forages for edible fruits or plants, somebody who hunts wild boar or other fauna, somebody who collects grubs, either to eat or as bait for fishermen. Now at this stage, we enter into the double coincidence of wants problem, which is to say that in order to engage in barter, you need to find somebody that wants something you have as well as has something that you want. And that's where money comes into play. So money is just the most commonly desired commodity in the economy, maybe coconuts. We see in this graphic here, the guy has fish and wants rope. The lady has rope, so they should be able to make a trade, but she doesn't want fish. She wants berries. So either they have to find a third person who has berries and wants the fish, or they can't really make a trade. But with money, he can just sell his fish to anybody who wants it for money, and then he can use the money and buy rope. So it makes it much, much simpler to trade, much easier to trade than with barter. And trading is very important because of the subjective value theory, which states that people value things differently, subjectively. For example, I, as a carnist, place a high value on a nice juicy steak, whereas a vegan would place very little value, or maybe just the trade value, exchange value of that steak. They wouldn't want to eat themselves. They might not even want to profit off it, so they might destroy it, which they would be in their right, as it's their property, if it were their property. So people place different value on items, and that's why you can engage in mutually beneficial exchange. Contra Aristotle, who thought that a fair exchange had to be the exchange of the exact same value. So here in this economy, it's easy to see if you have only one thing, you have only fish, then it's easy to see how you might value other things more than fish, especially if you have a lot of fish. Fish have a shelf life. They're going to go bad if you just hoard them, especially if you don't have any salt or anything to cure them. But at the same time, it's very easy to see how people without any fish would want them, since they're such a source of calories and vital nutrients and a delicious meal. So we can see that people can make mutually beneficial exchanges by trading If they have a lot of something for something else, if they have more than they can personally use or will use, they can engage in mutually beneficial exchange, and both parties benefit.